people who are heading ministries. Specifically, we have Dr. Neeraj Mittal, who handles the Petroleum and Natural Gas Ministry. We'll have his perspective on the entire issue. And then we have a range of technology folks as well on this panel. That's one thing we haven't touched about earlier. What role does technology play, and how does it make the entire ecosystem more vibrant? So we know we are in between you and lunch, so we will have preliminary remarks from each of the panelists. We will then probe a set of issues, and then we'll throw it open to the floor. So I'd like to start with you, Dr. Mittal. We've talked a lot about the LPG subsidy. We've talked about how that can be a game changer. It's like the first step, really, in the entire DBT agenda. So I'd like to hear from you, firstly, how is the entire LPG subsidy distribution going from a DBT perspective? And more importantly, what is in it for the end stakeholder and the consumer?
Thank you. DBTL, as everybody knows, is a very recent phenomena as far as LPG is concerned. But the scale and scope of DBTL has expanded kind of magically in the last 3 or 4 months. The scheme was launched formally on the 1st of June 2013 in 20 districts. And when we started, we had the Aadhaar seeding of only about 12% in the banks. And it was about 40–50% in the LPG database. Today, as we speak, in these 20 districts which were initially covered, our LPG seeding has shot up to 77%, and the bank seeding is close to 68%. So I think that simply goes to say that as in the first panel what was discussed, that it is a process, and we cannot set milestones, and if that milestone is not achieved, we say that this scheme is a failure. We have been grappling with various challenges, but the effects of the DBTL are already evident. We have been able to, so far received around 2.5, it's now in implementation in 97 districts in the country. And we have collected roughly 2.5 crore Aadhaar numbers. We've already deduplicated roughly 1.5 lakh duplicate connections, which means roughly an annual saving subsidy of 70 crores per annum. Now, that is the simplest of the benefits we have already achieved. Apart from that, the sales of, the intention of the direct benefit transfer was to actually reduce diversion of subsidized LPG into the consumer market, into the commercial market. The sales in September, when the market prices came into force in these 20 districts, is minus 20% compared to September last year. So, which just gives you the growth rate of commercial LPG, which is where it was getting diverted, is roughly 25 to 30%. Now, these two numbers put together just show the way we can benefit from the direct benefit transfer scheme. The consumers are benefited because they get subsidy in advance in their bank accounts, as long as banks are reachable. There is a good BC model. People are happy that the money is there with them to buy the cylinder. I'll just like to repeat one, a press report in Kerala which said that the money reaches faster than you can cook rice. So that's how, is the consumer perception in a state of Kerala.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Also would like to welcome KK Jalan. He is the Provident Fund Commissioner. Welcome, sir, to the panel. Mr. Jalan, question for you. Your organization touches the financial lives of millions of Indians. Wanted to hear from you on how you think about financial inclusion and what role does the EPF play in that?
Thank you very much. I think EPFO is using this opportunity to interact with the wider audience for the first time. Employees Provident Fund organization is presently having a subscriber base of, active subscriber base of more than 4 crores. Now that is, I think there is a population, the 33 countries have a population of more than 4 crores in the world. We have a subscriber base of more 4 crores. In the month of September, approximately 3.5 lakh establishments contributed Provident Fund to the EPFO in respect of 4 crore subscribers. That is the figure. We also have a pensioner base of 44 lakh persons, and out of these 32 to 33% are women and children. And see that this pensioners base is also very large, because number of pensioners of the defense, railways, all government combined, according to the 6th pay report, was only 38 lakh, and EPFO is already giving pension to 44 lakh pensioners, and this number is increasing naturally every day. In the case of the financial inclusion, you can see that we are transferring now all the claim settlements and all the claim amounts through the NEFT. And therefore, 92% of the payments which are being made by the EPFO in a year, and these payments are more than 1.5 crore payments, we are making through the NEFT system, not the electronic system. Electronic mode is being utilized by making these payments. 44 lakh pensioners, in respect of 44 lakh pensioners also, we have now started using the core banking account system of the banks, and all the money is transferred to these pensioners' account on the first day of every month. That is a great benefit to these poor pensioners who get a pension of approximately 1,000 rupees per month. So therefore, this is really a financial inclusion. Financial inclusion in the sense that 75% of the subscriber base of 4 crores is having a pay level of only 6,500 or a minimum wage level. They are working at a minimum wage pay. And that is why we are basically dealing with the poor industrial workers, or poor workers, or maybe poor worker who is engaged by the management services, and manpower supply companies and other things. So therefore, and all this money, the amount of the money which is being transferred every year is 26,000 crores through the claim settlement, 9,000 crores through the pension benefits, and around 125 crores through the insurance benefits, other insurance benefits. And 50,000 crores is the in money, that is the money which the EPFO gets every year. Of course, there we are to slightly do, EPFO is to take some steps. Under the Act, we are mandated to operate through the SBI, and therefore we have some challenges there, that all the payments which we received, around 50,000 crores, we are not receiving today through the electronic mode. We have reached up to an extent of 50% there. Our next goal is that we also, in payment also comes to us through the electronic mode. If we achieve that 100%, we might be in 2 years' time, the whole thing will happen through the electronic system. And we will help roughly opening of 4 lakh accounts. Now the banks can really look forward to this. When we are dealing with 4 crore accounts, we are getting some complaints. Where I was talking to Shahi Exports, for example, who works in the apparel sector. They have 87,000 employees. He is having a problem in opening the bank accounts of all these 87,000 employees. I don't know what is the problem. I am in a discussion with the banks as well as the Shahi Exports as to how we can resolve this problem through the help of the EPFO, or maybe through the Aadhaar number, so that the financial inclusion also improves. That it's a challenge for the banks, it's a challenge for us. We have a major subscriber base. This subscriber base will further go up by 2 crores of people. That means a subscriber base of 6 crores of people, such a high subscriber base, if we bring them into the financial inclusion and we provide them the financial services, we will do a great service to the country. And we can use also EPFO through the next level, that is the financial literacy part. Maybe EPFO can cater to. That is another part I think this conference can take to financial literacy of these poor workers. That is another level. I think the government of India has already started some exercise in that. Perhaps EPFO can be roped in and we can do something on the financial literacy. Thanks for giving me time.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Mittal, back to you. There's also a big change management problem here from an internal perspective. You have to change the way government employees think about the end consumer. You have to change the way they think about technology. How are you looking at that, and what kinds of initiatives have you undertaken to implement that change?
Change management has been I guess, the biggest, not technology really. I mean, although it's a technology initiative, DBTL is a technology initiative, but I think the change management has taken the most of my time and effort to really succeed in this endeavor. We have a lot of stakeholders in this program. The internal stakeholders, which are my own consumers, my own employees of the oil marketing companies, and then there are the intermediaries who actually deliver the cylinders. Your famous, I'm sure all of you have some relationship with your LPG distributor when you get the gas. And those are most of the lot where, the major criticism arises in today's marketing setup. Apart from this, the scheme has a lot of, bankers as one of the major hub where we have had to also, interact and ensure that the expectations of the LPG consumers are met. A very strong IEC, information education campaign, has been the hallmark of DBTL. We have deployed multiple modes of, reaching out to consumers. We have deployed multiple modes of seeding the Aadhaar number in the consumer databases. We have got strong internal training programs for all our employees of the oil marketing companies so that they are outward looking and look from the perspective of the consumers. We have had a series of focus groups with our consumers in the entire country where we have sought the expectations of the consumers, and those have been, visibly seen in the initiatives such as the transparency portal, which we have launched, in the portability of LPG connections, which we have just recently launched across the companies. Till now, you could not change your connection. Now, in 30, 40 cities, you can actually change your distributor at will. One of the persons wrote to me saying that, I've spoken to my distributor 40 times so far, and he never responded. Today, I applied for portability, and he came to my house. So suddenly, the equation has changed. From the consumer being on the receiving side, consumer has become the king. So there has been a lot of internal change, and such positive feedback from the consumers leads to a lot of change initiatives on their own. And I think that has been the key to success in DBTL.
Mr. Jalan, back to you. You mentioned some of the challenges you faced in terms of moving the banks to electronic payment modes. You mentioned financial literacy. What are the other big challenges you see there from a financial inclusion perspective?
You see, in the last 2 months, when I was concentrating on moving it to the pension system through the core banking account system, it took clearly a lot of efforts for me to talk to the banks and to get just into the system of the core banking account system. Maybe just an inertia here. I think that the inertia might be in the EPFO employees or maybe in the banks. That's the one thing. And we had to take care of that inertia. Now I have the core banking account numbers of all the 44 lakh subscribers, and therefore I can move it onto the core banking account system. That is the one thing. The second is, I said that I am mandated by the Act, EPF Act and the MP Act, that I will have to deal through the State Bank of India. I cannot go through the other bank. So that mandate, which I will have to go to the legislature to change it. Till then, my in-payment system is only through the SBI, and therefore I'll have to work out through the SBI system that I can get all the payments through the electronic mode. I am getting some around 40% payments through the electronic mode, but rest of the 60% payments, I'll have to deal with the SBI. And today, when I deal with, because I deal with all the bank branches in the country, I find that around 15,000 branches out of 1,05,000 branches, overall branches in the country, are not NEFT enabled. So therefore, that is another challenge which perhaps all the banking industry will have to look at, and maybe those bank branches, 15,000 bank branches, will also be NEFT enabled. And maybe another service can also help the post office. Post office, India Post is also now going on the E mode. If that happens, maybe the the organizations like us can really reach to the village level, and we can provide services through even the post mode, which we are not providing till now. That is another challenge. Financial literacy, I think we have not looked at that at all. There is a system that we, and the financial inclusion side now, whenever we open a bank account, earlier there was a system which came out that the banks will authorize every person to have an overdraft facility of say 500 rupees, just to bring into the banking mode. But that hasn't happened in the case of the industrial subscribers. Perhaps if that also happens, and we really go forward on the financial inclusion side, especially for a industrial worker which is a minimum wage level, that will be real banking, and that will real provide the, I think, the satisfaction which the government wants to drive through the financial inclusion. Otherwise, we just don't want to open a bank account and that's all. We just want that that man should become bankable, and that must do the banking and must work through the banking system. If we are able to teach them how to work through the banking system, that is another important part. And that is what I want to mention about the financial literacy part on the first place. EPFO is taking it up. Malaysian EPFO, for example, and some of the Singapore EPFO are working on the financial literacy in a bigger way. But we, EPFO India, is also now thinking of working on those lines, and we might go into the financial literacy part of the industrial workers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in the outside perspective now from Bangladesh. We have Mr. Ishtiq Ahmed Chaudhry. He's the Managing Director and CEO of Trust Bank in Bangladesh, and in many ways Bangladesh has been a pioneer in microfinance and other kinds of instruments related to financial inclusion. So, sir, would like your thoughts on across the border, what's happening in Bangladesh, what kinds of initiatives, challenges and successes you folks have had.
Thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate the organizer for inviting me in this financial inclusion conference, global conference. I am representing a private commercial bank of Bangladesh, Trust Bank Limited. And in Bangladesh, we have 56 banks, commercial banks operating, and more than 8,000 branches are operating in Bangladesh. But the status of financial inclusion in Bangladesh is not encouraging, as there are almost 49% of the adult populations are unbanked or underbanked. And in Bangladesh, you know, the main challenges of financial inclusion is the geographical access. Although I have mentioned that there are 8,000 branches of commercial banks, but they are operating only in urban areas. They are not operating in the rural areas, remote rural areas. So the financial inclusion is a great challenge for commercial banks of our country. So as far as central bank is concerned, they have already taken this challenge, and central bank has asked all the commercial banks to open 10 taka account for the farmers. As state-owned bank has already, they are opening the account of 10 taka, but private commercial banks are not doing this. They have been asked by the central bank to open the account of 10 taka account, and we are also operating on this line. And as you know that in the financial inclusion, there are some barriers in Bangladesh, and this can only be achieved through one of the tools is the mobile banking. What I want to tell you that as all of you know that Bangladesh is a 150 million population is there, and mobile connectivity is almost 110 million people are using the mobile. So financial services, mobile services can be given through mobile banking. And is rapidly, we are thinking on that, and the government of Bangladesh and the Central Bank of Bangladesh, they have already given permission to the 28 commercial banks to operate financial mobile services in the country, and our Trust Bank is one of them. we, as of today, there are 7.2 million people are using mobile banking facilities in our country. And as as I want to mention here that this is rapidly increasing, this mobile banking facility, and more and more banks are involving their all efforts in the mobile banking. We know that in a commercial bank, opening an account is very complex, and they should maintain the minimum balance. But in the mobile banking account, minimum balance requirement is not there. So this is an encouragement on the part of the banking sector to the rural people. So we think, and the microfinance sector, the Bangladesh is an example. Grameen Bank is one of the great example in this subcontinent, and I hope that the commercial banks also play their role in the financial inclusion. And this is my thank you.
Thank you very much. Just switching the topic to mobile payments. We have with us Ram Rastogi, who heads IMPS for NPCI. So Ram, there's been a lot of talk about mobile payments. It hasn't seen a lot of uptake in the country today. It's probably one of the strongest possible levers we have for financial inclusion, given just like Mr. Ishtiq was saying about access to mobile phones. Everyone has it. 87% of Indians have a cell phone. So it could be the big game changer from a financial inclusion perspective. So your thoughts on how mobile payments will take off in India, and then specifically on IMPS. What have been your experiences with telcos and banks on the uptake of IMPS?
Thank you, Mahesh. As all of you know that National Payments Corporation of India is a company promoted by 10 banks under aegis of RBI and Indian Banking Association. The company is formed under Act of Parliament. Our job is to create a robust payment system across the country, which is ubiquitous, channel agnostic. So what we have done, we have created various innovations based on that. Initially, we were given the National Financial Switch, which interoperates the entire ATM payment system with 160 banks, 1,25,000 ATMs. We do about 9 million transactions a day. Riding on the same infrastructure, we have created a process innovation. We have formed a mobile banking service which was known as initially Interbank Mobile Services, but subsequently we realized that mobile itself will not happen, so it has become a channel agnostic system. It works with Aadhaar also. So recently we have launched, on 9th of October this month, Aadhaar-based remittances system. So Mr. Jalan is talking about sending pension and other things. You can use Aadhaar number, you can do that. With Mittal sir, we are doing the Aadhaar-based payment system where the LPG, entire LPG subsidy is being remitted through Aadhaar-based payment base. So what we are trying to do, we are creating the system which is made for this country, which is interoperable, it is secure, and it is a real time. IMPS takes only 20 seconds to transfer National Unified USSD platform, where we have added on one side 29 banks and few telcos. Once these people started working, as of now we have only 2 telcos, BSNL and MTNL. Once other telcos are coming, perhaps it will be one of the best platform for financial inclusion. It will be cost effective, and using the USSD channel, we do the interactive session with the user. So imagine a scenario if somebody doesn't understand English, we can talk to them the local language, the vernacular language, and take him through and facilitate and complete the transaction. So these are the things what we are doing today. We have also added telcos. We realized that bank itself cannot map the entire country. There are 900 million mobile phones, but only 200 plus million accounts. So what we have done, we have also added telcos and prepaid card issuers like GI Cash, here we have the It's Cash, we have the Oxy Cash and Airtel Money on the same platform. So the customer of these telcos, the mobile wallet, can send and receive money from bank account. So today On IMPS system, we have 59 banks covering about 98% banking customers. On the other side, we have 4 telcos and PPIs at this point of time. M-Pesa and M-Money is also coming on board with this. The entire mobile wallet people will be also with us. And believe me, once they come, we can create a universal platform, and this can help in last mile and creating a very good financial inclusion system in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Just probing a little more on that, you spoke about telcos and non-bank providers. How do you see the market landscape panning out over the next few years? Do you see banks taking the initiative? Do you see telcos playing a bigger role in mobile payments? And there's been some talk about the pricing mechanisms which exist between banks and telcos. How do you see that issue being resolved?
So the pricing is always decided by the consumer who's going to use that. We do not decide the pricing. If there's a value, consumer is willing to pay. You understand the NEFT, people are paying 5 rupees. Even then, they're not using NEFT. They are going to the BC outlet and remitting the funds. Why they are doing it? Because there is some more value available at BC outlet. So what I'm trying to say that if you have 1.2 billion people, they have aspirations to have the same kind of services. It is imperative on us to provide them a cost-effective service, which is real-time, but without compromise the security. The second thing, what we talk about, the democratization of the payment system. A cooperative bank can also join the same platform which is being used by Citibank and HSBC. The security standard we are maintaining. So what we are doing, the interoperability is a buzzword to have a very strong financial inclusion system, which is not only based on mobile, it can also be based on ATM, it can be smart card, and it can be an Aadhaar. And we have proved that we have created an ecosystem which works on everything. It can be a combination of 1 or 2 or 3. And once it is happening, sir, the entire DBT will be seamlessly going to the people.
Great, thank you. Lastly, I wanted to bring in 2 technology providers in the entire ecosystem. Sanjeev Shriya, Managing Director of Smartchip Limited, and Aurelian Narcisses, who heads IT security solutions for Thales. So, Sanjeev, over to you first. We talked a lot about financial inclusion, we've talked about DBT. From your perspective, what are the prerequisites to make this a vibrant ecosystem? What needs to be done from a service provider perspective, from a bank perspective, and even from a regulatory perspective?
Thank you. Well, I'm a technologist, I'm also a dreamer, and obviously we are all very, very happy that, the Aadhaar platform or institutions like NPCI are really pushing hard for inclusion and, setting systems that can include vast majority of the country. I have a few points to make, and I think some of them have been discussed, but I'll put a twist to it. First of all is standardization of technology. So, whereas the standardization of technology has been done in the last few years in a significant way, so let's take the example of biometric technology. With the coming of Aadhaar, at least we have resolved the problem as to how the biometrics will be acquired, how they will be matched, and therefore there is a consensus there. Similarly, as far as the back-end technology is concerned, NPCI and similar institutions have done a lot. But I think there is still a lot to be done in terms of standardization of technology at the field level. If I have to say, I must say that partly, let us say, the not so happy situation of the financial inclusion till now has been because of the use of disparate and non-standard technology by multiple either solution providers or service providers, and to that extent even institutions like IDRBT and others need to take stock of the situation. And yesterday I was in another panel discussion and I raised this point directly with IDRBT, that why is it that today we have created over the last few years islands and islands of technology and solution providers or service providers are not able to talk to each other, or we are locked into a particular technology and there is no competitiveness that can be implemented. So standardization of technology is, I think, a very important part. Industry is ready. I think industry knows exactly what are the lock-ins that can be created or are being created, or how to get rid of that. And we have two very good examples in India of how the industry has met together and made sure that the technology is standardized. RSBY scheme is one such area where there are more than 40 or 50 service providers, a completely open and interoperable system. 150 million people are impacted, and it's working in the field. The second point I want to make is that security, and this point was raised by NPCI, and I really, they have done a lot to make sure that the systems are secure. But what are we doing regarding the front-end security? Let's take an example, or let's say even just the example of seeding. Some people are seeding databases by manually acquiring the Aadhaar number from a person and seeding it into his bank account because there is a need to have this percentage of seeding. But a good database that Aadhaar has created will get impacted by a non-technical seeding. So we must make sure that the seeding is done correctly, that it is online, that seeding is so accurate and perfect that it doesn't need to be challenged at some point in time. And then the security. Is my biometric secure? Is the template secure end to end so that there is no compromise? I mean, I can change my PIN, but if my biometrics gets compromised, I can't change my finger, and on and on. And the final point I would like to make is that banking and telecom, they are the two areas that they should try to find a convergent solution in terms of field operation. eKYC is a wonderful example where these two guys can come together, these two sectors can come together, because the person who needs, today, eKYC allows a SIM card to be issued without any paperwork. I mean, that's just getting implemented, and similarly for a bank account. So ultimately, permanently my number will not remain the same. I might want to change my service provider. I might want to change my bank service provider. So at the field level, we should try to find ways where multiple services can be delivered cost effectively. Technology allows that. And today with the Aadhaar platform and a common view of the customer, this is easily possible. The caveat is standardization and security.
Thank you. And Aurélien, from your perspective, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Aurélien, yes, my French name is a bit difficult to pronounce it. So I'm going to join Sanjeev regarding his point of view for security. Wanted to say, like in payment infrastructure, the success of the technology will release on the security. There is no customer who are going to play with their money on the technology if they are not sure if it's secure. So the bank, the technology provider, and the customer, they have to build a chain of trust. So in the past banking, we had before the perimeter security, a big building, so it was to protect the bad people to go inside the building, and as well to show to the customer that the money is in the safe, in a strong building. Then you have the layered security. The customer cannot have access to all the bank. Employees have access to the desk, and very few people have access to the safe. Then you have the transaction security. In the past, when we wanted to withdraw money, we had to go to the branch to show physically an ID card, a document, a signature. And the customer has to make sure that this money was on the good account. And then the transport. To move your money from point A to point B, you used to have a armored vehicle or a diligence. But now, with the digital world, we have to ensure that the network is secure. So until the bank do not show to the customer that the network is secured, the transaction is secured, not the roof, apparently, the people will not go for the technology. So we have to show to the customer that the technology they are using is safe. And this will give the benefit to the bank as well, because if you have an ATM fraud, you will damage your trust with the customer. So we believe, at least in our company, that security is very important, and it has to use some hardware and physical security.
I believe you've got a few slides to put up. Would you like to do that quickly?
No, I mean, like, the slides I wanted to present you was more or less the resume of what I was saying, so
Okay.
I'm not going to repeat myself,
Okay.
but
Okay.
thanks for proposing.
Well, that's fine. Okay, I'd like to throw it open to the audience now. Any questions from the floor? Can we have mic there, please?
Hello. So NPCI has done a wonderful job as far as transaction is the concern. Transfer of the money is concerned. They have made a bridge to transfer the money. As well as interoperability is concerned for delivering the money through micro ATM, that is also going on place. But despite that, money delivery through micro ATMs at ground root level is not taking place. Why? Whether it is on account of lack of technology or lack of unviable or uneconomic matter. Please. My question is this. My question is to Mr. Shreya Saab.
Actually, you raised both the right issues. I would say that it's a mixture of both. Firstly, the compensation model is flawed. In the beginning, the banks were reticent to really take it as a business for themselves, and it was more a compulsion to really bank in the villages. And so the compensation model was in terms of, number of accounts opened. So the service providers were told, you can keep on opening the accounts, we'll pay you 100 rupees or 80 rupees or whatever per card. So the customers were being acquired, and in most cases there were hardly any transactions. Unfortunately, they lived in islands of technology, and that's the point I raised. So they could not even get rid of the service provider because there was a lock-in of technology, and the cards that were issued could not be managed by somebody else because the keys were with the supplier, there was no key management solution. The application service layer was all non-standard, and so the people were left with high and dry. And this is something that I'm also the president of Smart Card Forum of India. I've been pushing very hard that why shouldn't we have standardization of the technology so that there are multiple stakeholders, multiple players who can implement. But of course, there has to be a business case. And the business case can come if multiple stakeholders pay for the presence of the BC, which could be something that by combining banking and telecom or insurance or some other service provider could happen. But for that, the form factor of the device must be good enough. Even today, bank accounts are being acquired using single finger biometrics. Now this will never be used, but the banks don't listen. Today, the Aadhaar has said that you must acquire all the 10 fingers, but the banks continue to acquire bank accounts using single finger biometrics. They will be non-standard, but that is for the bank to understand this.
My question is to Mr. Ram Rastogi. Yeah, of late, NPCI have introduced two payment schemes or two payment formats, which are NG, RTGS and NACH. I would like to know what was the driver for introducing these schemes? And secondly, as a banker, how is it beneficial for the banks to port to these schemes or be compliant to these schemes?
I would like to little elaborate your question and what NPCI is supposed to do in that. Can you repeat your question a little bit?
Yeah, basically, there were two payment schemes that were launched of late, probably by RBI. One was NGRTGS and the other was NACS. These are the two new formats, and banks have been asked to be compliant to those. I think the deadline was October this year only. So I just wanted to know, what was the main reason behind launching these payment schemes or instruments?
Perhaps, RBI, see, very well, there's a lot of discussions happening around the country that regulator cannot become an operator. If regulator is operator, then who's going to regulate them? So then the genesis of NPCI is only for this reason. It was told and it was decided that all payment system except RTGS will be given to NPCI, and we started working on that. So we have created NSCH, which is a part of improvised version of ECS. And once NSCH is stabilized, perhaps ECS will merge with that. See, what is happening at debit and credit, this bulk handling is one of the big use case which is not being properly targeted. For the reason there is no electronic mandate management system available in the country. The mandate management is lying with the branches and it's not being properly taken forward. So the NPCI is working on this and entire DBT eventually will come on that NSCH platform once it is in full-blown mode. Today we only do for LPG and we're using the Aadhaar-based platform, and the same platform can be enlarged and created a pan-India system. Hope this clarifies your question. Right? Yes. Okay. So let me tell you, the two committees are being constituted by the present Governor RBI, Mr. Raghuram Rajan. One committee is under chairmanship of Mr. Nachiket Moore, which is working on the how to take the financial inclusion and payment system together. The second is on the technical line, which is headed by Mr. Sambamurthy, who is a retired RBI CGM and Director IDRBT. The date of a submission of the report is 31st December, and perhaps there will be a lot of clarity when both the committees are submitting the report.
My name is Babalal Jain. My question is to Aurelin and Sanjeev. How secure is end-to-end your solution? Thales is a great company, but how secure it is? And then second to Sanjeev, how is the standardization for a particular process is possible? Because there will always be disruptive forces. So how do you see it happening?
Go ahead, Aurelin.
Okay, to secure our solution is basically a hardware, what we call HSM, Hardware Security Module, which is used to secure about more than 80% of the banking transaction. So our module is based on cryptography. We manage the keys of cryptography. So the transaction is encrypted and the keys are managed with a dedicated box called HSM.
What are the vulnerabilities in that system? Your system has never been breached?
So far, no, not the boxes. Most of the ATM fraud or fraud have been breached, not because of misuse of the keys, because the keys have not been stored in the proper manner.
Well, I'll answer this a little differently. Sure, we can secure our back-end solutions, whether we use the Thales HSM or any other solution, because that's more kind of in a closed environment. I think the concern or the important concern should come that is the far end, the consumer-facing end secure, and are all the elements of that solution secure and standard? Standard means, let's say, interoperable. Now, obviously, this is a complex question, can't be answered here, but suffice it to say that somebody mentioned chain of trust. If we do not create a chain of trust, and if we do not invest in creating appreciation of that chain of trust, I mean, more security does not necessarily mean more cost. It means appreciation of the peril of not being secure. So imagine that if you lose your biometrics once, yes, I think you will be really concerned to use it again. And for that same matter, if, today morning there was a newspaper article that somebody's bank account has been breached of 19 lakhs. In fact, yesterday, ex-director of IIT Kanpur, he met me and he told me that his bank account was breached because somebody changed the mobile number and the alerts did not come to him. They went to the guy who, breached his account. Now, so ultimately the point here is that we must make sure that whatever end systems, wherever we want, they must be secured well enough and interoperable, so that there is no lock-in to a customer and no lock-in to a technology, and that everybody appreciates and the march of technology can continue.
Shankar from Maximus. This is to NPCI. You have been doing a great job, and we are also participants in NPCI, for the switching. Now, what I would like to know is, from the perspective of expanding, the scope or footprint of financial inclusion programs and ensuring that it is a success, is there any move contemplated for having the RuPay, card itself, as the last source of verification, and not have, let us say, in the sense, perhaps EMB, could be the other, verification standard. But, what I'm trying to, ask you is, would NPCI, be thinking on the lines of having something like the China Union Pay, and making RuPay, as that kind of a standard?
This country is a democratic country, and RBI doesn't allow this kind of thing, Everybody has to be here, be the MasterCard, Visa, and NPCI. As such, we do not. It's a level playing field for everybody. We need to provide a cost-effective system. We need to provide an equally global kind of security, and that will move on. So we cannot have a China Union Pay as of now. This is my knowledge, a limited knowledge which I have. Everybody has to compete here, and this country is known for a truly globalization and competitiveness. So as such, we do not have this kind of thinking.
I'm basically asking Mahesh that I think a lot of questions are coming in. So there are certain presentations. I mean, we can take on the questions later on, but we are standing between lunch and ourselves, so I would appreciate if you can carry on with the presentation.
Aurelien, your presentation.
So ladies and gentlemen, sorry if I have already covered who has access to the data. You have to segment the different areas according to the people. Then we have the transaction security. When you want to withdraw money, when you want to deposit money, you have to build a trust to the customer. You have to identify the customer with a physical ID or a physical document, a physical signature. And same, here it's to build the trust of the customer. And finally, for the transportation, we used to trust in vehicles to move the money from a point A to a point B. Just to prevent from theft, and as well to make sure that the customer trusts the bank and it's trusted enough to move money from a point A to a point B. So what have changed? Before, we used to protect physical things, like money, banknotes, gold, and we physically verify identity. But nowadays, with the digital world, we have to protect the most valuable things, the information. And we have to remotely verify the identity between the customer and the banker or the other institution. So what we have to protect has changed. It's not a safe anymore. We have to protect data centers. We have to protect customers' device handset via the network. And the threat has changed as well. So in the old world, we had the bad guys, the opportunistic group,
who wanted to enter the premises, break the safe, and the law enforcement agency was effective. Nowadays, the bank and the financial institution have to face a wider range of threat size with remotely attack, even from abroad and international organization. The perimeter security is regularly breached, and the law enforcement agencies cannot cope. We have another kind of threat, the internal threat. The classic IT administrator who has access to the old database, which we call the keys of the kingdom. We have the security policies not always followed by the employees. I'm very sorry if we have like some friends here from the auditors, but they are as well a threat for the banks because they have an increasingly sophisticated power into the bank. They are able to issue fines, stop business, and send senior management to jail. And we have strongest international regulation, like PCI DSS. So what the bank have learned through the year. So as per our experience, it's the bank so that with the digital world, you have to do a perimeter security with firewall. But what happens if someone enters to your fortress? So firewall is not enough. You have to protect the data closer, which means with layered security, protect data at rest, so for authentication, and protect data in motion, transport security. We are just coming back to the same basic of the old world. So for that, one of the technology to achieve those security is to use cryptography. First, to encrypt and decrypt, so to protect. Second, to digitally sign to identify the customer or the bank. And second, to authenticate. So how, in the modern world, what is the layered security? So here we have like web server, you have database, you have emails. You need as well a hardware. A hardware which is here to secure a database, a server, with segmented access within the infrastructure. For that, it's to build the trust of the customer. Same from transaction security. All those devices have to be connected, and we believe in hardware. So through using cryptography, with a secure, solid, trusted device to have a strong authentication of the people, and as well to build trust. And finally, for the transport security, to move the money from a point A to a point B, you have to make sure that the line is encrypted. And for that, you need a hardware security device. So I'm going to conclude with this image, which is quite interesting. It is like security is only as strong as the weakest link. You can build and spend money in various technology to apply security. But the bad guys will always look at the weakest link. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aurélien. I'd just like to summarize with the EY point of view. You saw the booklet we released today morning, which had the thought papers from Ernst & Young. Just a quick 2 minutes on the content there, and we would love to get your feedback through this conference on that. The first really is in terms of what products we think are going to undergo a huge expansion in terms of penetration. And we've got a point of view there on prepaid instruments, both prepaid cards as well as mobile wallets. So we've predicted that those will be that will be the way in which even maybe DBT will start to get transferred over a period of time. Right now, the government is using the bank account mode linked to a debit card, and really what happens is people take that and withdraw cash, and it goes back into the cash economy. What we are saying is that it makes sense to use a prepaid instrument to start to create that relationship with the consumer and engage over a period of time. So that is something which we've put out there. We've got some numbers. Would love to hear from you folks on that. We've got a kind of a unique perspective on mobile payments in that. What you're saying is today the system is kind of fragmented. You have multiple telcos all offering their own kinds of mobile money. And we're saying, what if the RBI was to issue electronic currency? What if you digitized the currency note? And there are many countries all over the world looking at this very actively. Of course, there are issues in terms of counterfeiting, etc., but that could really be the game changer in terms of digitizing currency itself. That becomes legal tender, you use a phone to move money, P2P, G2P, all of that becomes enabled. So we've got kind of a conceptual model there in terms of how mobile payments could work. Would love to have thoughts on that. Then there are two other papers. One is on point of sale, and we've done an analysis of point of sale, what it's going to change to, and specifically how mobile technology and biometric will enable point of sale. So that's a paper which is there. We talked about how banks should start partnering with ecosystem providers, which is basically shared services providers, which could help them increase their reach, which could be like BCs, or it could be people who help them increase merchant acquisition, loyalty service providers. So those kinds of models are there in the paper. We've got a paper on the government mandates. What is the right area for the government to actually intervene, and what effectiveness it will have in that. And then finally, we have a paper on the bank transformation agenda. How should banks look at payments as a business? Which area should they focus on, and how can they monetize that as well? So that's the set of 6 papers which you folks have. Do look through that, and we would invite comments. Thank you. And thank you very much to the entire panel. It was a great session. Thank you very much.
I would now request Mr. Mahesh Makhija to give away the panelists on stage the speaker mementos. Mr. K.K. Jalan, Central Provident Fund Commissioner, Employees Provident Fund Organizations, Ministry of Labour and Employment, Government of India. To Mr. Neeraj Mittal, Joint Secretary, Marketing, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Government of India. Mr. Ishtaq Ahmed Chaudhry, Managing Director and CEO, Trust Bank Limited, Bangladesh. Mr. Ram Rastogi, Head IMPS, National Payments Corporation of India. Mr. Sanjeev Shreya, Managing Director, Smart Chip Limited. And Mr. Aurelin Narcis, Sales Manager, South Asia, IT Security Solution, Thales India Private Limited. I would request Mr. Ram Rastogi to please hand over the memento to Mr. Mahesh Makhija. I request all the panelists to please step forward for a panel photograph.